Pablo Escobar was the richest man in the world in the 1980s, the head of the Medellín Cartel, which supplied 80% of cocaine of America, and was one of the most dangerous men on earth, responsible for thousands of deaths. During his years as an infamous drug lord in Colombia, he was wanted by both American and Colombian government agencies, making him one of the most sought-after criminals in history. The many faces of Pablo Escobar have captured the imagination of people worldwide. In this video, we will discuss the things nobody tells you about Pablo Escobar. Even that was not told in the Netflix series Narcos. So pull up your chair and get ready to watch. But before doing that, please subscribe Unimaginable and hit the bell icon for more updates. In the world of drug dealers, Pablo Escobar still reigns supreme as one of the most notorious criminals of all time. This video intends to reveal some untold aspects of the story you did not know. By watching Netflix Narcos series, you may have missed other aspects, such as the behind-the-scenes, over-dramatized truths, the cartels, and Escobar side of the story. So here are 10 things nobody tells you about Pablo Escobar. Number 10. Pilot paydays. Even though most people looked the other way, he still needed employees willing to fly drugs to the United States and face the risk of getting caught. The man himself even made his first few deliveries to Panama. Nevertheless, he managed to find a few pilots to help. They flew to America in his place. Their planes were filled with cocaine. Upon their return, they were replaced with cash and flew back to Colombia. The drug cartel also exported jeans to the United States from time to time, drenched in liquid goat game to extract and sell for a high price. Number 9. An expensive rat problem. We all lose money sometimes, but when you stockpile mountains of cold hard cash like the Medellín Cartel did, it creates a unique problem. Roberto, brother of Pablo and accountant, said Pablo was earning so much money that every year he had to write off 10% of it because rats would eat it in storage or water would damage it. There were billions of dollars being eaten away by rats. Pablo entrusted his finances to his brother Eduardo, ultimately became the biggest rat. The official informant of DEA, Roberto Escobar, was active in delivering Pablo Escobar to his enemies as stated by son of Pablo, Sebastian, in his book Pablo Escobar. Number 8. A major supplier. Most of Pablo Escobar customers were in the United States and willing to pay extra for his drugs. They preferred cocaine over coffee, and the Medellín Cartel smuggled 15 tons of cocaine into the U.S. daily. If anyone interfered with his supply line, Pablo would offer an interesting proposition to them. If they gave him silver money, he would take his leg. Let us say that people who messed with the cocaine of Pablo Escobar quickly disappeared. Around 80% of the cocaine in America came from his organization, consisting of 142 planes, 20 helicopters, 32 yachts, and 141 homes and offices. Number 7. Private zoo hacienda-naples. Pablo Escobar had a private zoo with animals of all types when he owned his 5,000-acre estate, hacienda-naples. It had animals from around the world, including antelopes, ostriches, elephants, giraffes, and hippopotami. African leaders had given him the hippos and elephants as gifts, while he had bought the giraffes and ostriches on his own. He had also bought 2 rhinos for $2 million in Zimbabwe that were being shipped. He could not have them on his property because they are a protected species. He purchased them for a cost of around $4 million each. Unfortunately, after his death, they were euthanized because no one could afford their upkeep. When Escobar was taken out, many animals were given a new home, but 24 hippos escaped and started breeding down the river. Locally, they were known as the cocaine hippos, and when they had increased to a pack of more than 200, were given a feature on National Geographic. Number 6. Family opinion. And of course, you knew it was coming, which is why it is important. After all, you have to wonder how much of the show story and the interactions of Pablo with his family were accurate and the opinion of Escobar on it. To answer your question, his brother, Roberto Escobar, was furious with the show and thought it misleading. This left you wondering what happened to his brother on the show, not just him. Roberto Escobar, after all, was also his brother. He was a cartel accountant until he was arrested following death of Pablo. Roberto was not pleased when the show portrayed Blackbeard, another accountant, being arrested and then providing testimony against the cartel to officials. In response, he requested $1 billion in compensation from the streaming giant for featuring his and his brother image without seeking input from him or other family members. This was only the first season, so he also volunteered to review the second season for inaccuracies before it aired. And then, for some reason, he had issues with other family members about how Pablo was portrayed at the Palace of Justice siege and how he died. But we will get to that. Number 5. The buried treasure. After arrest of Pablo, the U.S. Department of Treasury claimed his net worth was estimated to be around $30 billion at one point, but no one knows the true figure. At any rate, a lot of his money cannot be accounted for, and the Department of Agriculture speculates there could be $1.3 billion buried on Colombian soil. Escobar and his associates buried more than $100 million in guns, gold jewels, and straight-up barrels of cash, which the country government had already found. They even used sonar and high-tech digging technology to try and find the rest of their fortune. Who knows, we may all go to Colombia and dig around with metal detectors and shovels to secure our wealth from getting stolen by dirty politicians. His story had a tragic end when he was finally gunned down on the rooftops of Medellín. Number 4. Personalized prison. The ongoing standoff between Escobar and the Colombian government was at the breaking point, so he asked the government to imprison him instead of being extradited to the United States for a lifetime in jail. Despite his lengthy list of death and crime charges, Pablo and the government eventually negotiated his capture, his possible release from jail after a short 5-year term, and his guarantee that he could build his prison, which he staffed with his guards, and his family house overlooked it. It caused chaos in the country. After fighting with the government for many months, the government finally allowed his requests, which included a luxurious prison built to exact specifications of Escobar. After word spread that Escobar had turned the prison into a giant party place nicknamed Club Medellín, where he was in charge and killed many who displeased him, the Colombian government decided to transfer him to a military prison to control him better. However, the plans for that never worked out, and his men shot his way out and managed to get away, evading authorities for a few years afterward. Number 3. Relationship of Pablo with his family. Even though his family was not consulted, despite the integral nature of his story, his family interactions were interpreted through imaginations that are only dangerous when storytellers have preconceived notions. However, no other relationship was more misinterpreted than the relationship between Escobar and his son Juan Pablo, known now as Sebastian Marroquin. Sebastian is now free from the drug trade business, and he often talks about his experiences as the son of the biggest drug trafficker in interviews. In these, he explains that his father loved him very much while balancing the picture with the effects of his violent activities. Once he said,
"Well, I learned so much about violence that I became a man of peace, you know."
Sebastian says his father taught him about all the drugs, claiming that marijuana was his favorite. Sebastian should consult his father if he is ever interested in trying drugs. Perhaps this was the intention of Sebastian all along, or perhaps it was because he never suffered from the harmful effects of drug abuse due to a relative who once struggled. This component of interview of Sebastian includes a story of how he and his mother asked Don Pablo to stop his incursions into Colombia after his sister, Manuela, was severely injured. Of course, their pleas fell on deaf ears, which is consistent with the kind of person the father of Juan Pablo was. He recalls incidents in which Juan Pablo would cheat in games he played with his children to try and win. Juan Pablo is shown in the show to be very young and naive, but in reality, he was 16 years old when his father died. And he has a different version of what happened to Don Pablo from what is shown in the show, and will be revealing his thoughts about his dad soon. Number 2. The gruesomeness of Pablo Escobar. By watching the show on Netflix, you shall see that Pablo Escobar was one of the scariest men to walk the earth. Speaking at conferences in Lithuania, Agent Steve Murphy explains how law enforcement was not used to narco-terrorism before Escobar. Narco-terrorism, according to Murphy, involves using violence to create government policy changes related to narcotics. Murphy pointed out that Pablo Escobar is widely regarded as the first narco-terrorist. To be fair though, his terrorism tactics are widely documented in the show. What is also revealed is the reality that Escobar could easily order anything from people, but never produce anything deadly, as shown in instances like the assassinations of Moncada and Galeano. In truth, Don Pablo was a drug lord based on accounts from informants, but instead, he would get his close underlings to kneecap their rivals to maim them. This was from the 7th richest man in the world at the time. Escobar murdered every architect who built any of the hundreds of houses he built. Even in the case of childhood friends Moncada and Galeano, Escobar sent the thinkers of the men to their families as he did not want anyone to know the secrets of each estate. According to Bernardo Aparicio Garcia, all these things raise questions about the true extent of his cruelty. Number 1. The suicide of Escobar. People associate suicide with any story of the death of Pablo Escobar, including the claims of his son. When you see what Juan Pablo says, it is easy to see why he believes his father killed himself. Juan Pablo was the last person Pablo Escobar spoke to before he died. He gave his compelling argument on why he believes his father committed suicide. Let us start with his points. The first one is from Juan Pablo. His dad always told him that the telephone was death. For this reason, Don Pablo knew full well that the DEA, CIA, Center Spike, and police officers were monitoring airwaves to triangulate the locations of cartel members. As a result, Pablo Escobar was careful never to speak on the phone for too long and ensured that his son would also stay away from the phone. His family had just been rejected from Germany and was staying in Colombia at a hotel that the armed forces had appropriated to make a second point. These facts then seemed to mean that his family would never be safe wherever they went, so they must have known that their hotel lines would be tapped, as they likely were. Pablo likely knew these facts as well. The third point is that Pablo had taught his son how to commit suicide if captured, telling him that it was better to shoot into the right ear rather than the mouth to avoid torture and death. His brother said that Pablo had often told them it was not worth living a slow, painful death in pursuit of the innocent, so that suicide would be the best choice. Now let us go through the events above. A colonel named Martinez and his son, a lieutenant, are using directional finding gear to get a cell phone signal. In the meantime, Pablo Escobar is talking on the phone with his son, Juan Pablo, about an interview that Juan Pablo already knows about. Juan Pablo said his father called him 7 times about that interview. Looking back to his father, who appears shortly after law enforcement on the scene has gathered, they storm the residence and intercept the call as Pablo drops it to say something is happening here. I will call you back. Shooting starts. His bodyguard Lyman gets shot, and Pablo himself is shot on the roof. He gets shot a few times before dying from a bullet wound in his ear. I find it curious that he was found and killed on the same day as his birthday, almost as if someone wanted to celebrate with the Last Supper.